we achieved independence, the national government made an effort to provide labor a fair deal. And as a result of the efforts of the national government, what we did was we tried to restrict the hours of work. We introduced what is called as 48-hour week. We introduced Sunday as a holiday for labor. We also introduced minimum wages. Then the concept of minimum wages was replaced by the concept of fair wages. Scales of pay were fixed. We also tried to give leave, gratuity, provident fund, benefits to labor. An effort was made to provide housing to labor. In other words, labor began to be treated as a partner in production, and it was thought that labor should live with dignity because it is also contributing to the process of production. And without the help of labor, we cannot carry on the process of production. We treated labor as a partner in production. The whole concept was that labor cannot be treated as a commodity to be used whenever needed and to be discarded whenever not needed. Labor had a distinct place in the organization of production. Similarly, labor was to be protected against arbitrary dismissals or punishment, and so came the Industrial Disputes Act, which provided labor an opportunity to plead the case and also imposed certain restrictions on the employer to terminate labor without sufficient and good cause. So, a relationship developed in which labor was given a dignified position. That was the effort of the national leaders. Even V.V. Giri, who was the President of India, was one of the most important trade unionists of the country who helped in the process of getting a fair deal for labor in the post-independence period. However, over the period, what we found was that certain distortions developed, and it was felt that the Industrial Disputes Act gave a kind of excessive security to labor, and in many situations it was found that laborers do not contribute to the extent to which they can to the productive process, and productivity fell. This was more obvious in the public sector, where laborers began to think loss is that of the government, not ours. Let us move lazily, lackadaisically, and so labor earned a bad reputation and the enterprises entered into losses. Similarly, in the private sector also, excessive security granted to labor led to resistance on the part of the employers that this legislation is acting as a hindrance to foster productivity. And so the demands came that let us try to have a less restrictive or a more flexible system of labor relations. And flexibility here meant that the employer should have reasonable right to hire and fire labor. At that time, the word that was used was they should be free to rationalize labor. So there was talk about rationalization of labor that continued.
और ये हमें निकालने में लग रही है, हमें पता नहीं मालिक कैसा मालिक है, नौकरी छीन ली, अब घरों से भी निकालने की कोशिश कर रहा है, सरकार के पास वो सुनाई करे नहीं मालिक वो कैसा मालिक हम सुन में नहीं आ रही.
After the introduction of economic reforms in 1991, where emphasis shifted on privatization, marketization, and liberalization of the economy, the efficiency of every enterprise began to be judged in terms of productivity and also in terms of reduction of costs, because productivity could only rise if you are able to reduce costs, and then the margin between the market price and the cost becomes larger for the industrialist. In that situation, what we found was that there came demands that the employer should have the right to hire labor, and if labor is excessive, to dispense with labor. So they talked in terms of what is now called as labor flexibility. Labor flexibility means that the employers have the right to change the component of labor. In peak season, an employer may be needing 1,000 laborers. When the peak season is over, he may be needing 800 laborers for the normal production. So he should be able to dispense with the services of 200 laborers in that situation. Now, this kind of labor flexibility is being asked today because the employers are feeling that we cannot compete with the rest of the world, we cannot compete in the market if we are not efficient, and efficiency is being judged in terms of a higher rate of return by the employers. So this is the kind of situation in which we are finding today in the changed atmosphere. Now there are two sides of the question. One is that the employers want freedom to change the component of labor, and as a result they would like to reduce the component of regular labor. I am using the word regular labor to emphasize that such laborers who have been hired permanently, who will be entitled to leave benefits, who will be entitled to provident fund benefits, gratuity benefits, and other benefits that are available to employees. On the other hand, there will be a component of casual labor who will be paid a fixed wage for the actual days on which they work. They will not be entitled to any leave, they will not be entitled to any provident fund, they will not be entitled to any gratuity and other benefits which are associated with regular labor. The employers feel that the component of casual labor should be increased so that they can, in times of higher demand, get this labor and raise their level of production. Now, this kind of a situation is creating what is called as a conflict kind of a situation, because the laborers feel, on the other hand, that we are moving from a more secure unemployment to insecure employment, and this insecure employment is the cause of their worry. It will also mean that the employers refuse them certain rights of social security, that is provident fund, pension, leave during illness and leave during casual leave, at least for casual laborers. So this is a kind of a paradox in which the society is placed. If you go with the employers and go for hire and fire, you are downgrading the status of labor, you are introducing insecurity which is not accepted by labor. But if you go with the side of labor, the employers, they are finding a situation in which they find that they will be in trouble if secure employment continues and they are not able to reduce their cost.
ऐसा ही बिरला मिल में नौकरी करते थे हम, यहाँ से मतलब शिफ्ट करके वो हिमाचल प्रदेश ले गए जी हमारे को। हम वहाँ पे गए, हमारे को वहाँ रहने की भी परेशानी है, सारी परेशानी है, फिर हमारा गुजारा नहीं है, बच्चे हमारे यहाँ रहते हैं, पढ़ते हैं यहाँ जी। वहाँ से छुट्टी लेके आते हैं, छुट्टी नहीं देते हैं जी हमें वो। यहाँ से हम लेट हो जाते हैं 1-2 दिन, हमें फिर वो काम पे नहीं रखते हैं, परेशान करते हैं, रखते हैं, उसके बाद फिर निकाल देते हैं काम पे, कहते हैं हमारे पास तुम्हारे लिए काम ही नहीं है। डिपार्टमेंट हमारा दूसरा, मैं इलेक्ट्रिकल में काम करता हूँ जी, दूसरे डिपार्टमेंट का काम बताते हैं, वहाँ काम करो, काम मैंने कभी किया ही नहीं, कैसे करूँगा जी उसको मैं।
In the change scenario, the government has now accepted, in principle, labor flexibility to be introduced in our legislation. This is bound to raise a conflict kind of a relationship. and what we may describe as an adversary relationship. On the one side, the government thinks that we may have to amend the Industrial Disputes Act and therefore provide labor flexibility. On the other hand, labor leaders feel that it will be doing injustice to them. The question arises, what is the way out of the situation? We can have an adversary relationship, and this relationship is quite obvious in the present context. In a study of the West Bengal which I undertook, we found that the employers are taking advantage of the new scenario and undergoing for a large number of lockouts. After the lockout, the labor is forced to enter into contracts because the labor has a choice, either to get the lockout lifted and have a reduced workforce, or to continue the lockout and the firm may lead to closure and all laborers may lose their jobs. Therefore, what happens is that the laborers agree that we may have a reduced labor force. So 30%, sometimes 25%, in extreme cases even 50% of labor has been converted into casual labor. Now this kind of adversary relationship can subdue labor, but it cannot develop what may be described as a contented society. Conflict will continue, and in an atmosphere of conflict, we cannot have a better, more humane society. The question is, the management experts believe today that if you reduce labor and raise productivity, this is the denominator concept of raising productivity, or the accountant's concept of raising productivity. That is, given productivity, divide by the number of laborers. If the number of laborers is reduced, productivity rises. Now this is not a healthy way of raising productivity. This can do one-time good, but ultimately a firm must grow. It must make its labor more skilled so that it can contribute to better production. Today production processes are becoming more and more complex. Technology is becoming complex, and we need a larger component of skilled labor. That is why we talk in terms of knowledge-based industries are coming up, and we want skilled labor. So it is also the duty of the employer not only to dispense labor, but to improve the skills of labor so that the laborers feel that they are a part of the productive process. Unless this type of a positive approach is taken and labor is treated as a partner in production, we will not have a better and humane society developed in this country. Here I may try to point out that the Marxist concept, it has tried to bring about a conflict relationship, whereas Gandhi always emphasized a conciliatory relationship. Both labor and capital, they should develop a conciliation, and Gandhi's concept of trusteeship always impressed upon the capitalists. They are the trustees of labor, they are the trustees of the society, and they cannot ruthlessly suppress labor. Gandhi was appointed even as an arbitrator in a number of industrial disputes, and his awards were very much welcomed, and he was able to persuade both the employers and labor to come to a midway solution and try to understand the problems of each other and work a conciliatory approach. Unless we adopt a conciliatory approach, we will not develop a healthy society. So let us not move the pendulum to the other extreme. That is, at one time labor was having absolute security, and so inefficiencies crept in. And now we move to the other extreme, make labor as insecure as possible and exploit labor to the hilt.
आज हम मजदूर है, एक तरफ से कहता है जो भारत आज़ाद हुआ तो हमारा आज़ादी कहाँ है? जब हम इस फैक्ट्री के खून पसीना बहा के इतना फैक्ट्री को कहाँ से कहाँ पहुँचाए। लाला जी की भी हिम्मत नहीं था जिस फैक्ट्री को यहाँ से वहाँ तक पहुँचाए। सिर्फ मजदूरी होता है सबसे बड़ा शक्ति, मजदूर कमा के दिया है, उस पैसे को इन्होंने जो है अपना तिजोरी में रखा है, मजदूर को एक पैसा नहीं दे रहा है। और सबसे बड़ी बात यह है जो मालिक सामने आने की हिम्मत नहीं होता है। जब मालिक के सामने हमने काम करके दिया है तो तुम हमारे सामने आने में डरते क्यों हो? हम तो कोई भूत नहीं है, कोई तुम्हारे को मरने के नहीं आ रहा है। हमारा दुख तकलीफ जब घर में जैसे पेरेंट्स होता है, माँ बाप होता है, ऐसे हमने भी आपको जो है इस फैक्ट्री के अंदर बड़े के रूप में अपना पेरेंट्स के रूप में माना है, लेकिन उसकी मूल्य आपने हम लोगों को नहीं दिया। ये आपने ये चाहते थे ये प्रदेश से आया हुआ है और किसी तरीक़ा से ये अपना यहाँ से थैली, अपना बिस्तर और अपना टीन टपरा लेके ये अपना जगह चले जाएंगे, हमें कुछ नहीं देना पड़ेगा।
In the new scenario, we have been overbending to welcome the MNCs. These multinational corporations are coming. They are buying over the small firms. They are trying to displace lot many Indian firms and then developing a nexus between big industrialists and the MNCs. This is evident from the mergers that are taking place. They are also trying to create a scenario in which labor is being downgraded. They are not observing any laws. People working in the MNCs go right at 8 a.m. and they come right at 8 p.m. This is a common feature. And since they are giving better pay to the senior persons, they don't protest against them. But if this trend becomes common, then it is going to affect laborers all over. Moreover, this is causing what is called as labor displacement or unemployment.
The classical concept of multinationals being the giants only will give place to perhaps the individual multinational, the small size multinational company. And of course this will mean that if you look at this problem from the viewpoint of organized labor, there will be less security of keeping a job because society and the economy is changing rapidly. But there will be a lot of opportunities for individuals to find their own jobs, their own activity, and to not only to survive but to prosper in a world that will become ever more affluent and ever more dependent on knowledge. In fact, the society we are looking forward to is the knowledge society.
Democracy will have to be judged in terms of providing a better level of living to all population and not to a select class or an elite group. It is in this sense that the change scenario of labor will have to be modified so that the goals of development, full employment, economic democracy, social justice, they get harmonized rather than permitting the MNCs and big industrialists to exploit labor in the way they like. This is very essential.
There is no doubt that the worker is a weak community, but if it has got a bargaining power and it is united, then definitely he can organize, or they can organize themselves into a better, strong trade union, and they should not feel alone, lonely, and there should be provisions, and there are already provisions under the law that they are protected or helped by the conciliation machinery, by the arbitration machinery, and by the grievance cell. So the atmosphere that the working class is not all alone, it is an important factor of production, and they must be given a dignity of or protection under different laws.
In our country, there is lot of talk about amending the labor legislation to provide for workers whose services will be dispensed with. The government is bringing schemes like VRS, Voluntary Retirement Benefit. Now this implies that for every year of service, some pay will be admissible to the person who is retrenched. This is only to soften the resistance that is there towards the retrenchment and tell labor that certain people are willing to take VRS. Why do you stand in their way? But VRS is not a solution. George Stiglitz, Vice President of the World Bank, in his address to the International Industrial Relations Association, made a very telling remark, and that was, no safety net can replace full employment in a society. And it is this aspect which has to be understood. Since Stiglitz's ideas were not palatable to the World Bank, Stiglitz resigned his job in the World Bank. But he has left a very great message, and that is the reform process will have to be reformed, because ultimate goal of the society is to create conditions of full employment, provide dignity to labor if society wants to survive. Legislation has not been effective, and tomorrow we may go in for legislation to provide labor flexibility. That may become more repressive and again may lead to conflict.
Now, I see this change in 2-3 ways. One is that employers want the right to hire and fire. That means they want the right to retrench workers whenever they feel the need for retrenching them. Secondly, they want the right to have workers on their own terms. That means this, they are asking for a right to give whatever they can give to workers. Now, in this scenario, therefore, they are not very willing to agree to wage hikes, for example, or to adjust wages to the changing cost of living and so on. Thirdly, third change which is coming in this respect is the change in the workplace itself. What they call flexi work is coming. That means no fixed hours of work, no continuous work for 8 hours, no fixed workplace, for example. And this is becoming more and more common with the coming of the computer and the IT techniques, where you can work from any distance, etc., etc. Therefore, these changes, which are basic changes in the industrial scenario in the country, also require a change in the role of trade unions. No living organization can function without changes as per the requirements of the changing conditions, and therefore this law also applies to trade unions. Now, let me quickly give what I see as the changing role of trade unions in this changing context. 1. Trade unions shall have to prepare the workers to face the reality where job security is not ensured. Now, it means that they have to prepare the workers to change jobs. It means, therefore, that they have to help the workers to develop new skills of coping with these changes. Now, second role which I think is coming for the trade unions is that they have to prepare the workers for a situation where they have to have a new mindset on work itself. They have to have new skills of adjusting to flexi work, where they have to work at different hours and so on. And third thing, which I think is coming very fast, is particularly in the public sector. Some public sector enterprises have already offered the trade unions this possibility that they take over the enterprise and manage it, because they say we cannot manage it, there is a loss and so on, and workers contest this. They say no, loss is because of your management, not because of workers, and therefore they say okay, we offer it to you, you manage the enterprise. Now in this changed scenario, therefore the challenge lies in acquiring skills to manage, which is a very remarkable change in the workers' mindset. They have to prepare, they have to acquire new skills of managing the enterprise. That means they become worker managers of the enterprise. And therefore I think I see a very important role of the trade unions in this changing scenario, where they prepare the workers, particularly those leading workers, skilled workers, to acquire skills of managing the enterprise. And I think this is a big challenge.
The trade unions will have to rethink their role. They can no longer continue their performance on the basis of treating the problems of industry as they used to do in the problems in the time of industrial society. They will have more and more to request education for workers, education for the children of the workers. They will have to request continuous training. They will have to accept mobility and to take advantage of mobility. The world will be different, and I believe this is a challenge not only for capitalists but also for the trade union leaders, that will have to have the imagination that is necessary to live in this time.
Once we understand the factory as a community of labor and capital working for development, then we can develop a more harmonious, more humane, a better society where the interests of labor, capital and society, they can all be harmonized to move in a proper direction. All societies, if they want to become stable, they have to develop these goals simultaneously, that is growth and social justice. Otherwise, democracy will have no meaning for the people. And if democracy has to have any meaning, then economic democracy will have to be built in our system.